Hello everybody and welcome back to the Vanquish playthrough. In this surprisingly short part, we are going to finish off taking down the Creon.
Destroy the pump source. That should reverse the polarity on the gain medium and cause a critical explosion.
On it.
So we need to make our way up there. And hopefully it'll go well. Now, destroy these enemy ships before they set off, i.e. kill the pilots, because otherwise you are going to have a little bit of grief, because you're going to need to get rid of them all before you can really successfully start your climb. Thankfully, destroying the pilots destroys the ship, pretty much. So, there are certain targets that you really want to be going for.
You need to take the maintenance route up to the pump source.
Just like rock climbing back home.
And once you have defeated those initial enemies, this will come down and we can start to climb. And I'm rather embarrassingly going to get a little bit lost around this point, because it's very easy to destroy the enemies here, but then it's not necessarily clear which bit you're meant to go in. But it's all good, we'll make it to the top, don't you worry. And seeing as I have, at present, not a huge amount to go over, we're just making our climb, and we're going to get to a rather cool bit eventually. I am going to return to the Platinum Games blog, because it's not something that I have been back to for a surprising amount of time. So I think we will have a look at background design. So this was written by Vanquish art director and lead background designer Naoki Kitaki, who hadn't worked on a Shinji Mikami directed game since a certain horror game you might have heard of, so doing Vanquish certainly carried a feeling of nostalgia. So they've been designing backgrounds for games for over 10 years now, at least come 2010. Maybe a long time to be in the game, but it's something that they love, and it certainly hasn't gotten old. In fact, they're quite proud to say that they have an awesome job, but as hardware has advanced, those making backgrounds for games have seen their job descriptions change. They've arrived in an era where people crave reality, cameras can be moved around freely, and enormous stages are the norm. Simply put, they're pushing towards replicating the real world in the game world. Believe that in the future, what we can accomplish in the real world will be taken for granted as doable in the game world. There's also, well, they also believe in the inverse. That which cannot seemingly be accomplished in the real world will be possible and even seem real in the game world. Background design will play a big part in that moving forward, as it's incredibly important, and so it's an interesting job. While they're interested in and finding important, while they're interested in and they find it important both replicating the real as well as creating new realities, they think that as a professional it really is the latter that keeps me going. Vanquish was a project where I was best with creating one of these new realities. So they were quite curious as to what everyone sees in their heads when they hear the idea of a space colony. It seems as if it changes generationally. At the time, they were in the latter half of their 30s, so for them, when they hear the word space colony, the only thing that pops into their head is Gundam.
Gonna be fun.
Like one of those things you see at Sides 3 or Side 6, which are Gundam space colony locations. But to be honest, they're not that up on their Gundam, so they're worried about screwing up if they write about it too much. However, if they even knew about the colonies in Gundam, they should show you how much of an impact they had. Human-made colonies in space, situated on the gravitationally stable Lagrangian points between the Earth and Moon. Just writing that is quite cool. As a quick aside, this person also designed the Vanquish logo and modelled the Q in the logo around the idea of the Lagrangian points. Famed scientists have proposed many different types of colonies, and colonies have taken many shapes. But the day after they decided to base Vanquish on a space colony, they 3D modelled and presented a cylindrical space colony, much like the one that appears in Gundam. I think that they were really quick to agree on this design because there are so many people on the team that are of Gundam age. They also believe that the cylindrical design is the most exciting type of space colony design you can go for. The visual look of the interior space and how it expands out has a very sci-fi vibe, as the next town or city over could actually be above you. It's an impossible spectacle. Yet when they got to the point when it came to actually making things, they realised that there really aren't that many works featuring cylindrical space colonies. How would the people living inside see the world? There wasn't really anything that could be referenced, so the plan was to turn on the imagination and make sure to keep things colony-like. However, when they tried to make the colony, they ran across a number of problems. They couldn't use many of the visual tricks that recent games had implemented. It would expose too much. It's not a stretch to say that recent games look so good because of the liberal use of processing on the backgrounds and optical effects to make it all look better. Games use tricks to force the human eye into perceiving something as looking real. Furthermore, games going for realism make their distant backgrounds, i.e. the skyboxes, by either using high-resolution photographs of the sky, or by compositing a sky by projecting the god rays of sunlight that shoot between the clouds, then finishing it off with the details like shadows and bloom lighting that would be cast by the objects in the scene. Yet the truth is that you don't really need to draw that many objects in the sky, so you can reduce the draw load on the hardware and increase the quality of the graphics elsewhere, essentially killing two birds with one stone. Briefly, this is so hilarious. It's a highlight for me. Anyway, back to the background design. It's one of the reasons, with that whole killing two birds with one stone, it's one of the reasons why you see so many games on the 360 and PS3 that have stages with bright skyboxes. However, because the setting for Vanquish is the interior of a space colony, they weren't able to use the standard methods for creating a sky. Of course, the colony has an atmosphere, so having a sky wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. However, they went to all that trouble to make it a colony, so clouding it up with thick atmospheric elements would be getting their priorities backwards. There had to be a better way. The first idea was of rendering the entire colony in 3D. If they could devise some sort of trick, they would model the whole thing without putting too much strain on the production costs. They could cram the whole colony, which is 6.25 miles in diameter, with models. Of course, you'd end up with a ridiculous amount of objects and polygons, which would mean they would have to customise the engine to draw everything out. The Vanquish engine was created by making improvements to the existing Bayonetta engine, but to be honest it ended up being entirely its own beast. They found new approaches for how they had previously handled areas such as lighting, shading, rendering, collision and model construction. One reason was because they now needed to deal with a vast number of objects. They needed to handle and process at high speed, large groups of objects used in the background, such as the ones used for the colony itself. And another reason for the engine rework was because they had to improve their development processes. While it's the first time making a shooter, they envisioned that creating the maps would rely heavily on a process of trial and error. How could they produce levels at low cost? In their experience up until now, the first level that you make never survives that way until the very end. They work in a wonderful environment where teams have a crash and build style, and it's pretty awesome. So they started creating an environment that would support these kind of requests, and they faced a lot of difficulties, but it ended up working out in the end, really. There's a few more bits on this blog post, but I think I'll be going a little bit overboard if I continue, because we are very much at the end of this mission. We just have this really, really awesome QuickTime event and cutscene, because we need to obviously destroy the Creon in the most ridiculous way possible. Well, yeah, but we have got to destroy this thing, and that's exactly what we are going to do. Ha ha!
Where the hell are you? Below you. Just jump. Come on. Declaring an emergency. Hold on.
Well, at least we survived that. It could have gone a hell of a lot worse.
Private Daniel Grassi, MSOB-2, sir. I was stationed here so I can take you to the enemy positions.
Lead on, Private.
This way, sir.
And there we go. I think for the most part that went rather well, actually. Time to move on.